today with all of the answers to your questions. A couple of weeks ago, to celebrate the release of my brand new podcast, plug, I promise that will be the last one, I asked you guys to send in your questions for me to do the very first Q&A I have ever done on my channel in 4.5 years. This is a bit overdue. Consider it to be like all of Leanne's high school homework ever. And you guys have outdone yourself. So this may be part one of a 2-part video, or it might just be one great big long video. You'll know, I don't know, you'll know by the time that you're watching this. So without any further ado, onwards. Saucers and Sorcery asks, tea or coffee? Let me see. Tea. Are there any other beverages? Lux Flakes asks, that is very difficult to say, by the way. That may very well be take 3. You will never know. Lux Flakes asks, how many books do you read in an average week? And I had absolutely no idea, so I had to turn to my old friend Goodreads and ask, and it turns out that I read on average 2 books a week, and those books are usually between 350 pages to 375 pages long. Tina Louise Reads Books asks, what is your favourite classic? And that answer will always be The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins, although my heart would like to submit that I have read Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck every new year since I was 16. So do with that what you will. FTLO Reading asks, what is my preference for reading when out and about? Physical, ebook or audiobook? And this is an interesting question because I am not above doing all 3. However, I am an extremely clumsy person, and that has got worse as I have got older, and so I am terribly worried about my e-reader and whether it's going to come back in the same condition that it left the house in, even if it has a case on it and even if it's in my handbag. So I guess by default I am saying physical books. Bobby Reads Too Much was really mean, and she asked if I could transport to any world other than our own, where would it be and why? Girl, I do not want to go to any of the worlds that I love to read about. I am an overweight, slower than average, extremely white girl with vitiligo and allergies. I would die. Like, I'm going to be the girl that dies in the first chapter. I am the velociraptor fodder of the world. Pewter Wolf asks, what was the last book you DNF'd as it started to tackle a subject that made me extremely uncomfortable? So I guess if I had to give an answer to this one, I would say Whistle in the Dark by Emma Healy. I DNF'd this one because the mental health representation from the very first page really offended me. The main character is a woman who has a teenage daughter who is very mentally unwell. And from the very first page, the way that she talks about her daughter and the way that she talks to her daughter is like she is a massive inconvenience to the world and not as if she is ill. And while I understand that some people do feel like that about their children, her entire character in the first couple of chapters seemed to hinge on the fact that she was just really annoyed and fed up with her daughter being mentally ill, and to that I suggest that her daughter was probably really tired and fed up with being suicidal. So yeah, bye girl, bye. Aw, Dee Dee from Brown Girl Reading asks, how are you feeling? Thank you for asking that question. That is really nice of you. I'm gonna assume that mostly you're talking about my broken brain, which I am very open and honest about on this channel. I do suffer from extreme anxiety and quite bad depression, and I've talked about it in a bunch of places before. So if you're new, hi. This is a safe place. If you would like to talk about your experiences in my comments, they will always be a safe place for you to vent. If I'm perfectly honest, the reason that there wasn't a video last week was because I was having a kind of bad brain week. I was randomly utterly triggered by an episode of House, of all things, and I spent a whole week in just this little ball of anxiety, unable to think outside of myself. And mental health goes like this, and even if it's going on an upwards gradient, it's still up and down. It's never a straight line. So I guess the answer is that right now I'm pretty good. Last week could have been better. next week should be better still. Steph Galvin asks, what is your ideal reading routine? And to be perfectly honest, I don't think I have one. I mean, my really ideal reading routine would be on holiday, preferably with some beautiful views, a pool somewhere close to dip into, and a pile of books that I don't have to leave, and cocktails. Cocktails. My friend Stephanie asks, how you so awesome? And girl, I is awesome because you are my friend. You guys might remember Steph from a video that I did way back when I did an unboxing of some Harry Potter Funkos. I met Steph at an old job which both of us hated with the burning passion of 1,000 Suns, and we bonded, being the only two normal humans there, over books, Harry Potter and takeaway lunch food. I love you, girl. Becky asks, if you could be an animal for one day, what would it be and why? And I must be an extremely boring individual because my mind automatically said, I want to be a kitty cat. Not even a big cat, not even a tiger or a lion, but I want to be a kitty cat. Also, if it looked like I was hanging down on one side, it was because I was petting this idiot. And I guess that my answer of kitty cat would be because I'm surrounded by these fools. Kelly Shirley asks a bunch of really interesting questions, and the first one is, how many books do you own? I actually took stock for a project a couple of weeks ago, and I own 1,195 books. That is including all of the books on my Kindle and all of the audiobooks that I own, and it is including multiple editions that I have of certain books. She then asked, do you prefer paperbacks or hardbacks? And I had to have a long think about this, but in general I think that I prefer paperbacks, although I do love both, and I particularly love the artistry that goes into some hardbacks. She then asked, do I prefer longer or shorter books? And I'm going to be contrary, not that that's like me at all, and say that I actually like books that are right in the middle of that. As I said earlier, I like books that are between like 300 and 375 pages long. I feel like I get a good balance in them. Sometimes shorter books, although I do like them, can skimp a little bit on character development or plot, and I feel like sometimes I need both to get a story going for me. Our next question is, what bookish character most fits your personality? And I hate when I am asked this because my mind immediately goes blank. I forget every book I've ever read and I start going through my favourite characters, and your favourite characters are not necessarily characters who fit your personality. So I went and asked the wonderful Oracle of Kirsty who she thought, and the first thing that she said was McGonagall. Scottish, doesn't necessarily take much crap from anybody, and has a high preference for cats. And her final really good question is, which author have you read the most from? And hands down that is Agatha Christie. Jacqueline McMenamin asks, can you remember the first crime or thriller book that you read? And I can. It was, I believe, this Wilbur Smith book. It was definitely a Wilbur Smith book, but I think it was this one. It was my granddad's. I borrowed it because it was a long book and I had read all of mine, and it was awful. She then asked, who is your favourite crime fiction author? And I will preface this by saying that there is a vast catalogue of Scottish crime authors out there who are wonderful. Crime in Scotland is a very rich genre, and I have barely dipped my toe in it because I read so widely. And so I will say Helen S. Fields and her Perfect series have been the ones that have stuck out for me the most so far. She then asked, what are your top 10 crime or thriller novels? And I am finally going to film a video on this coming up very soon, so I will answer that question in long form elsewhere, but I will give you a recommendation for a book that's going to be on that list that I've hardly talked about on my channel before, and I don't know why, and it is Red Dragon by Thomas Harris, which is the first in the Hannibal Lecter series, which is now 4 books but was 3 with the original trilogy. I haven't actually read the last one, which is a prequel when Hannibal was a kid, and I don't know if I'm going to read it, to be perfectly honest. You know that way where you have a finished series in your head and then suddenly there's a new book and you're like, don't screw it up. April from Getting Hooga With It has asked me a really cruel question, and she wants to know what is my favourite mystery or thriller or crime book. That is a really stressful question, but my entire body wanted to say as soon as I read it, All the Birds Singing by Evie Wyld. A couple of years ago, this was all I could talk about on my channel, and I think I talked it to death, so I shut up about it for a long time. But this is one of my favourite books in the entire world. I read it in 2014 and I still think about it almost every month. No word of a lie. It's difficult to tell you much about it without giving anything away, but what I will say is that it's about a woman called Jake who has essentially run away to a very tiny Scottish island where she has taken over a sheep farm. And from the very first page we are told that every day Jake goes into the fields to tend the sheep and she discovers the carcass of a new sheep which has been killed in an interesting way, and she does not know who or what is slowly picking off her sheep, but she thinks it has something to do with her past. And then in the next chapter we are told about Jake's past, but it is done in a backwards chronological format. So at the end there is a crescendo where both of the timelines really meet, and it blew my mind. I literally walked about for weeks afterwards in a daze thinking I need to reread this novel, but I don't think I can handle rereading this novel. It is so incredibly good. My lovely Silka Maria, who has been with me since the very beginning of my channel and whose comments never ever fail to make me smile, has asked a very tricksy question. She wants to know what is my favourite setting for a crime thriller mystery novel that is not Australia, and that's just mean because you know that was what I was gonna say. I guess my brain works in a very predictable way, because if I can't go to Australia then my brain seems to want to go to the other extreme, which is extreme snow and cold, where people are blizzarded into towns and villages for a long time and you might be the only person able to investigate that crime. I guess when I'm thinking about this that I'm thinking about Snowblind by Ragnar Jonasson, and I'm probably also thinking about Burial Rites by Hannah Kent, which kind of is by default a crime novel. And her next question is there anything specific that I would like to learn in terms of a hobby? And I will say that I'm already pretty crafty and I do draw, and I also do a lot of craft with clay, but I guess the thing that I have always kind of put off trying to learn is knitting, and it's because I don't think I have the patience. K.S. Thompson asks, do I reread novels, and in specific do I reread crime novels? And yes, I am a serial rereader. If I find a book with a world or characters that I love, I will happily sink back into it, especially when I am having bad brain days. And specifically when it comes to crime novels, I really like it when I already know the conclusion and then I can either go back and see all of the red herrings, or I can then go back in and pretty much ignore the mystery and just be there for the joy of the characters. And I'm specifically thinking about books like the Cormoran Strike series by Robert Galbraith or the Philip Marlowe novels by Raymond Chandler when I say that. Kimberly Lee Rue asks, why do you think that you love the crime and thriller genre as much as you do? I think it is honestly because all of the elements of all of the other genres that I really love can all be found in thriller, crime and mystery. All elements of life are here, and generally these genres have license to talk about some of the more grittier topics in a more honest way than you'll find in other genres. Kimberly Lee also asks, favourite urban fantasy series? Hands down, the Mercy Thompson series by Patricia Briggs is by far my favourite urban fantasy series. This is a series that, despite starting in the early 2000s, is so incredibly woke. The sheer breadth of representation in this blows me out of the water. We've got gender rep, we've got LGBTQIA rep, we have racial and ethnic representation across lots of different spectrums. And that is the end of part 1 of this video. I hope you have enjoyed. I have answered so many questions and my brain is absolutely melted, but there are so many more to go in part 2. And just as a teaser, some of the questions for part 2 are things like my most hated book, my own writing, some interesting book recommendations, and my favourite things about Bonnie Scotland. So stay tuned, part 2 will be with you very soon, and in the meantime, enjoy all of your bookish things and I will speak to you soon.